Perfect. Great. Well, hello, everybody. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out, and it's also great to see some familiar names and familiar faces in here. So thank you for joining us. For those of you that perhaps don't know me, my name is Sam, and I'm the general manager here at Penda Photo Tours, and I also lead some of the trips as well, including India next week, which I'm very excited about going to. At Penda, we specialize in small group, immersive, and ethical photography tours designed to help you not only experience some of the world's most incredible destinations, but also come away with images that you're genuinely proud of. And at Penda, everything we do is designed around the photography. So that includes logistics, incredible locations, expert guidance, and strong focus on developing your skills in the field. Now, when people think of Botswana, for me at least, some of the names that come up are Okavango Delta, maybe Chobe National Park, the Kalahari, and rightly so, because these are all really phenomenal places to go and visit. But they also come with a fairly significant price tag. So if you've done much research into Botswanan safaris or photo safaris, you'll notice that they're considerably more expensive than other regions like South Africa, for example. And also with that kind of status and popularity, they can also be a bit busier than what you might imagine when you go to some of these more well-known areas. So what we're going to focus on today is a very different side of Botswana. It's a region that's far less visited, far less commercial, and feels genuinely wild and remote, which nowadays is a really difficult thing to come by. There aren't many areas that have still got that kind of remote, wild feeling. And as well, from a photographic perspective, of course, it's an exceptional destination. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going there. So today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Alan. Alan, who many of you may already know, has been working with Penda for many, many years now. And this Botswana tour, along with our South Africa photo safari, are two of our most long-standing and most popular trips. So this is an area that Alan knows like the back of his hand, from wildlife behavior to the landscapes, and also how to get the very best out of your photographic experience there. So Alan, if you wouldn't mind just doing a little intro on yourself.
Sure. Evening, everybody. I'm Alan. Thank you for the introduction, Sam. I'm a wildlife photographer. I'm a private safari guide. I'm a writer. I work on a freelance basis for Penda Photo Tours and also for my own company in places like the Masai Mara. I used to be one of Fujifilm's official UK ambassadors. I still do a lot of work for Fujifilm at photography show events, things like retailer events. I also do a little bit of work with Three Legged Thing, and in the UK I also work with Cumbria University on their wildlife and media course. We are going to talk about Botswana today, as Sam said, and I just want to add something into the what Sam said about the uniqueness of this environment. That Tuli wilderness, what we're going to talk about, where we run our safari, was once described by Lonely Planet as Botswana's best kept secret. So that tells you a little bit about the sort of exclusivity, if you like, of the region that we're going to talk about.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alan. And just to kind of build on that and what we're going to be talking about in this webinar, it's not going to be a technical webinar or a kind of checklist style presentation. We really want to take you on a bit of a journey and really immerse you in what it's like to be on this Botswana photo safari. So starting from the moment you arrive in Johannesburg through to life at Serolo camp, where we stay, and into kind of the daily rhythm of our photo safaris. We really want to really show off what this experience is about. So through Alan's firsthand experience, along with the imagery that you'll see on screen, we're going to give you a feeling of what it's like to be there. And we'll focus on the diversity of landscapes at Tuli, and of course the wildlife encounters that come with that, and the key photographic moments that really define the experience as a whole. So with that in mind, I think it makes sense to start at the beginning, and that is on your arrival. So we advise all of our clients to arrive into Johannesburg Airport in South Africa, and mostly because it really is the hub of Southern Africa, and it's got great international connections. So it's very accessible and logistically makes sense. So Alan, could you just take us through kind of what that first day looks like for people once they arrive in Joburg?
Sure, yeah. Just before I do that, if anybody wants to ask any questions, by all means, pop them into the chat. And we'll also have a bit of a questions session towards the end where we'll do it more ad hoc. But if anything sort of comes up and you want to use the little chat thing as a sort of little reminder for anything, then please do feel free to use that, and we'll catch up with it towards the end. So as Sam mentioned, we fly into Tambo in Johannesburg because it's the most accessible airport in the region. Gaborone in Botswana isn't as accessible. It's more difficult to fly to internationally, and plus it actually takes longer to get to Tuli from Gaborone than it does from Johannesburg in South Africa. So we have a little road transfer north. It's an opportunity to see some fantastic parts of South Africa that most people probably wouldn't be familiar with. It's an opportunity to make a couple of stops to get some biltong and things like that, which is the absolute necessity for when we are in the area. We cross over at a place called Platyan, which is the border point, which is a little bridge going over the River Limpopo, and that takes us into Botswana, where we met at the other side by the Tuli wilderness guide Joe, and he does a little sort of 30-45 minute drive along to Tuli wilderness, and we are there. We do kind of like to encourage people to try and stay the night before in one of the airport hotels in South Africa as well. It just makes it a lot more efficient in the morning to get out there, earlier start to get up the road, and more chance of having a more fulfilling game drive when we actually get there. So when from there we've got the camp. We'll do a little few first impressions of the camp when we arrive. On the left hand side there, that's a sort of what we would call the communal area, if you like, and we've got around that we've got 6 individual lodges. We've got this lovely mashatu tree in the middle, and that's generally where we sort of eat, we drink, we meet, we relax when we're not in our own lodges doing our own thing. It's a lovely old tree there, and we'll get the fire going on at night time and in the mornings for a coffee, and then obviously in the evenings for a more adult type of beverage, a beer, a glass of wine, and a gin as well, whichever one you want really. Interestingly, we do actually get a lot of wildlife coming through the camp. It's not fenced, and nor should it be. You know, we are merely temporary residents in an animal's wilderness. So we do get a lot of birds. We have barn owls, African barn owls in that tree. We have had one instance where we had a leopard with an impala in the tree while we were there. It only ever came in at nights when everything was quiet, but we did see the remains of the impala getting less and less every day, every morning as we took a look up. We get elephants coming through camp. We get baboons coming through the camp. And we often get hyenas, and we even have had lions walking around on a night time when everything's quiet. What I do like to do as well is sometimes take a couple of trail cams and put them up around the camp, and then sort of review that footage on a night time just to see what's been going on through the night. And we have a look, and it's quite interesting to see what's visited us through the day, because people wake up and when they hear the noises and things. So little look in one of the lodges, typical lodge at Tuli. There can be one or two people sharing a double or a twin, and each have their own toilet and shower, fridge, and a nice little storage area behind the bed area. Very, very comfortable, very, very warm, and very, very cool at the same time, just because of the design of the lodges. It's a lovely little place, very sort of homely and not overly luxurious, and certainly not too sort of basic or rough and ready either. A little bit of food and camp experience. So by the deck, like I said before, where we gather and socialise, there's a small plunge pool, and this looks out over a watering hole. We get, like I said, we get lots of impala coming through. We get lots of elephants, baboons, various birds around. So there's lots of photography you can actually do during the day as well. Even though the light's a bit harsh, it's still sometimes good just to get a few techniques practiced and things. And now and again, some elephants do come very, very close, like this fella did, just to drink from the plunge pool, it happens all through the day and sometimes at night as well. So it's quite interesting when that happens. And on the right, this fella is Kennedy, good friend of mine. He's a chef at Serolo camp, and he has an extraordinary ability to set up a bush bar in the middle of nowhere in absolute pitch darkness and get an effective bar going for us who enjoy a beverage or two on our safari wanders.
Good friend to have.
He's excellent, yeah. Unfortunately he does support Manchester City, but we'll not hold that too much against him. He's a
Everyone's
nice
got their
fella.
flaws, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So, food and camp rhythm. We've got some little communal area there where we sort of chill through the day. When I'm working with people, when I'm working with photographers, I prefer to sort of work on two levels. I work with everybody as a group on general things, but then when we get down to sort of camera specific things, I find it easier to work in small groups or even one-to-ones because people have different sort of learning requirements, people have different camera systems. So we use this area to do a little bit of tuition. We do some photography processing in Lightroom or Capture One or Photoshop or whatever people sort of choose to use. And it's also just somewhere you can chill, relax, and watch what's going down at the watering hole. Like I say, there's a plunge pool. You're more than welcome to use it, but it is rather chilly. Even when it's warm, it is winter out there. And if you go into that plunge pool at this time of year, you're a braver person than me, to be fair. And then at night time, we sit, we get around the fire, and it's all lit up when we come back from our evening safaris. Quick dump of the bag in the lodge, freshen up, and come out for a drink before evening meal, and then settle down for the night and get ready to do it all again the next day.
And Alan, just before we
Yeah.
move on there, I think it's worth mentioning that for this trip, we actually take the whole camp. So the camp is strictly for our group. And I suppose,
Yeah.
Alan, the question then is, having that whole camp, what impact does that have on the overall experience?
Yeah, it means the group kind of tends to bond together, really. It's interesting because we're all working for the same thing. We're all doing photography. I have worked at a couple of other lodges where we don't have that sort of exclusivity, and so it's a much better learning experience. We're not getting sort of disturbed by other guests. It sounds a bit negative. I don't mean it to sound as negative as that, but it is a much more sort of quality photographic experience when you do have exclusivity of the camp, and it means that it's quiet. It's just us. We're not disturbing anybody. We're doing our thing as a group, and we're quite sort of left to do that without worrying about what we're doing with others who are perhaps resting during the day if we're making a little bit of noise or something like that.
I suppose leave your camera gear everywhere, take over the
Absolutely.
tables.
Yeah. There's no sort of no kids running around that are going to kind of press buttons on your laptop where you're not looking, or try to take photographs or selfies with your 600mm lens or anything like that.
And I suppose one of the other things as well is the flexibility in your schedule, right? In meal
Yeah.
times and
Yeah, definitely. Kennedy, bless him, the chef. I mean, he does such a great job, and we basically run our schedule runs the camp because we're the only people there.
yeah,
What time we want to do things, that's what time we do things, and there's nothing preventing us from that.
yeah, yeah. Which I suppose is nice as well. If you're on a really special sighting and you don't want to
Yeah,
leave, then you
yeah,
don't have to breakfast push back an hour or whatever it might be.
that's absolutely yeah, definitely. There's nothing to stop us from doing that.
Brilliant.
So daily safari rhythm. Each day, as a lot of safaris are, is a morning drive. We get up early. We meet for coffee at around 6 a.m. or something like that, because we're in the middle of we are in the reserve. We don't have to go far to photograph anything, so we don't have to be up at 4:35 a.m. or anything ridiculous like that, because like I say, wildlife comes through the camp, and we're very close to the Limpopo River. So we meet for coffee around 6 a.m. We head out for a game drive. Quite where we don't have a rigid schedule. We're not going to say, right, we're going to explore this area today. Tomorrow's going to be that quarter. Then we're going to go up here and do that the day after that, and blah, blah, blah. What we do is we work to react to what we're seeing and what we're hearing. So if we've heard something early that morning or late at night, if we've heard that there might be leopards, if we've heard lions, if we've heard evidence of a hunt, then we'll use that. Now, we have this little phrase when we go away that we call it the bush newsletter, and I think it's quite a nice little thing to talk about. It's about what we see and hear. It's about the tracks, what we saw the night before, and our Tuli guide Joe as well. And I've got some photographs of Joe. We'll bring that together, and we come up with this ever evolving plan. So it's ever changing. It's not rigid, and we have to sort of react to what the bush newsletter tells us. We return maybe it's around 10 o'clock, maybe it's a little bit earlier, maybe it's a little bit later, depending on what's going on. From then, we kind of rest, chill, do our own thing through the day, do some photography tuition, do some group tuition, some individual tuition. People sometimes need some technical help with backups and things. Some people like to do some Photoshop and Lightroom, image organization. It's a flexible approach, and having sort of little groups and having a camp with exclusivity sort of really does facilitate that. And it's important at some point to grab a sleep as well. We're up early for a lot of mornings. It's quite a long way to travel, so it's worth getting your head down for a couple of hours as well. At around 2ish, we might have a little bit of lunch, and then it's back out again, reacting to what we've seen in the morning, picking up on some clues, this bush newsletter. Once the light's gone from the habitat, but perhaps there's still some nice light in the sky, we usually find somewhere nice to enjoy a few of the classic safari sundowners as the light sort of disappears over the horizon. And then it's a little bit of a night drive back to Serolo camp to freshen up, meet for a beer, get a chat around the fire, and then dinner, and then a good night's sleep in between the elephants calling, the lions roaring, the leopards rasping, and the hyenas hooping in the background as well, and see what the trail cams pick up as well. That's basically the safari rhythm of the day.
And I think, sorry, Alan, just to
Yep.
kind of add to that as well. I think with some of the other national parks, like in the Kruger or in the Masai Mara National Reserve, for
Yeah.
example, there's so many other vehicles in
Yeah.
those areas that a lot of the
Yeah.
time it could even be a phone call or a radio call. Whereas here in Tuli, you don't have that. So it's very much relying on, that skill set that I think is lost sometimes within
Yeah.
guides of
Absolutely.
tracking and reading the situation,
Yeah.
which then makes those sightings all the more special, I think, when you do get them.
Yeah, and I think as well, as you can see there, just brought that photograph up of one of the vehicles that we use. It's very good for tracking and reading what's called the spoor, which is prints, tracks, evidence that animals leave behind. Anything from broken branches, corpses that they've been feeding on, tells us what's going on, and it's a very easy way to find out what's going on because we haven't got that dense foliage of the Kruger as well. We haven't got the big grass savanna of Tanzania and Kenya, where you can't really make many prints out. There you can wake up and you can just see so many lion prints, leopard prints, hyena prints, and you can start building up this sort of real story as well. And that's fantastic sort of way to do a safari, because it's all about the completeness and that whole story coming together, not just going taking a few photographs.
Yeah.
So I mentioned Joe before. Joe's our Tuli guide, sitting in the driver's spot there. And Joe is an absolute wealth of information. He's worked in Tuli wilderness for so long. He's incredible at tracking, working out how the animals are moving through the habitat. And as you can see, I'm also in the vehicle too, in the middle somewhere. We talk about photography, helping everybody with settings while we're out and about. It's not just something that we do back at the camp either. This thing has to come through to a practical sense in the vehicles when we're with the animals as well. So that's basically my role, helping with settings, composition ideas, talking about fieldcraft, talking about animal behaviour, how we can use that to improve our photography, predicting that behaviour, and sort of using that to get the shots that we hope to get. And that's a big thing for me, fieldcraft and animal behaviour. Anybody that knows me, anybody that's seen me talking at various events or done webinars and things before, I'm a great advocate of fieldcraft and animal behaviour. So in the vehicles as well, we have, I did mention before, we have a 11-seater Toyota Land Cruiser. There's 2 front seats, there's 9 in the back, 3 rows of 3 seats, and we leave the middle section free for gear. Everybody's got a couple of lenses and a camera bag and a couple of bits and pieces, maybe a monopod. So that middle seat is always left free for for gear. So we have a maximum of 6 people. Sometimes we only have 5, but because the vehicle is completely open, as you can see, there's no roof and there's no sides. It's a typical sort of South African style of vehicle in that we use in Botswana. And it just means that you've got an absolute panoramic view of what's going on around you. Unlike the Mara, where you've often got vehicles with sides and roofs and opening windows, we're completely open to the elements as well. So it's these are fantastic vehicles for photography.
Yeah, I think also it makes a huge difference. Even with a canopy, you've often, well, obviously you've got the support bars on either side, and they
Absolutely.
can even get in the way. Even if it's not a closed vehicle. For me, this is the
Yeah.
best vehicle to be in. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's great for bird photography as well, especially when you've got sort of vultures and things coming
Mm.
around and circling a kettle of vultures, coming down. It's so much easier to photograph that movement if you haven't got a if you haven't got a roof on top of
Yeah,
you.
definitely. Yeah.
So Tuli Wilderness is. We touched on this before when we started. Tuli is an incredibly special place, and that's what I'm going to hope to get over um, in the next few slides. Now, personally, I really love everywhere that I work. I'm very lucky to work in the places that I do in South Africa, through Kenya and Zambia, and places like Tuli Wilderness. Tuli is just very, very different to anywhere else. It's different overall, but it's also different within, and I'm going to try and sort of explain that. Nowhere else that I go to has this incredibly changing, diverse habitat and landscape within one reserve location. Places like Greater Kruger, they're fantastic, great wildlife, don't get me wrong, and I love being there, but it's basically bushveld, a bit of open savanna. Got Kenya, I love that. Masai Mara savanna, fantastic. But Tuli Wilderness, there's such a change in the habitat and the environment and the landscape as we move over it's a large place, but in the grander scheme of things, it's a relatively small area in a massive in a massive country. And these changes in the habitat and the landscape are great for photography because the species change as the habitats change. We see certain species in certain parts that we wouldn't see in other areas of the habitat. And also when I'm taking photographs, I'm a great sort of advocate of trying to photograph subjects in the context of their habitat and their landscape as well. And rather than just sort of flat grassland savanna, in Tuli we have a lot of landscape features which we try to sort of build into the photographs that we're actually taking. So we'll start down on the Limpopo River. This is basically the border between South Africa and the area of Botswana that we're in. It's right in the southeast corner of Botswana, near Zimbabwe and near the sort of Limpopo province of South Africa. It's This river provides a lovely sort of riparian habitat of river and floodplains. It's often reduced to a trickle in the dry season when we're there, or standing pools of water like it is in that photograph, and it's right on the doorstep of Serolo camp. We often just head down here just to see what's going on before we head up to the other plains. And when we're down there, we see a lot of elephants in this sort of riparian habitat with some lovely sycamore fig trees there. The floodplains bring a lot of elephants in there because they'll come and dig for water. There's often some standing water there. And the elephants, and we also get impalas as well. There's a lot of chacma baboons in the trees, and what they're doing is they're causing a lot of these sycamore figs to drop down to ground level. So the impalas and the elephants are coming and feeding on the sycamore figs that are dropped down to to basically get a free meal. So we take advantage of that with the photography. And where you have a lot of impala, you generally have a very sort of high chance of seeing predators and leopards, especially as well. And we do get a lot of leopards in this area, and we do get lions as well. So some elephants typically down on the Limpopo riverbed there, and it's nice to go down and watch them sort of reaching up and stretching out to reach for the fresher vegetation. So just a couple of images, little chacma baboon in the background of one of them. So the fruit falls down and the elephants enjoy a meal on the ground, or they reach up to the vegetation as well, to sort of feed for themselves. What I was hoping for when I took these photographs was to get that classic image, where you see the elephants actually go up on their back feet, and they were so
Mhm.
close to doing it, but it never happened. But I kind of just, it's two photographs I like. It shows two very sort of unusual poses of elephants, and it's nice and clear with it being on the river as well.
And I have to say, I've already told Alan, but I love the shot on the left there. There's just something that's just so it's easy to look at. It's just so nice to the lines, the light. It's a
Yeah.
really stunning shot. Yeah,
Cheers. I'm sure it's some sort of. It looks like some sort of yoga routine for elephants, or
yeah, it does. Yeah, downward elephant.
Pilates or something like that. Yeah. So also down on the river, if we get down there in the morning, and if certain sort of conditions come together, i.e. the sunrise, the light, the angles, the position of these chacma baboons, if they all work out, there's a chance to sort of get really creative and do some underexposure to create this kind of backlit image. Now, just for the avoidance of doubt, that's actually two separate photos. It's not a really big wide tree in the middle. Okay. And it's very creative thing to do when you get the light coming behind with animals that have a sort of loose fur around them, because the light diffuses on the fur, and we get the light bleeding through, and a little bit of underexposure, maybe it's a stop and a third or something like that, and you get this nice sort of backlit effect. And it's an example of how we can sort of use the habitat and the time of the day, the morning, and the animals, just to try and be a little bit more creative with the photography. Not only be creative, but also just learn a little bit more about the principles of exposure and how that affects the shutter speeds, and of course the end product that we have as well. I mentioned before baboons and vervet monkeys in the trees, dropping sycamore figs. There's lots of impala feeding, and of course, when there's prey, there's predators. The baboons and vervets are very, very good fieldcraft indicators as well. They bark a lot. They're very loud. The vervets will I'm sure they don't shout and scream, but it feels like they're shouting and screaming and really staring at leopards, and they're very good at telling you where they are. And of course, alarm calling impalas as well. So they're really good at helping us find predators, especially leopards in that area. And where there's leopards up trees, invariably what you get are lions beneath them. The scent of a carcass or something spreads very, very easily. It brings lions in, and you occasionally get the lions just sitting around underneath the trees, hoping for some opportunity to scavenge for some scraps. Sometimes they try to climb the trees. They haven't quite mastered that art yet. So it's good to watch, and it's just a good way of bringing in other animals into the area as well. So the river itself is home to an incredible range of species, not just mammals, but also birds. And one of my favourite birds to photograph down in the river area are these white-fronted bee-eaters. They're just absolutely incredible. The beautiful colours, the greens, the blues, the reds, the oranges, and the whites. And they're very quick, very fast, and it goes between a session of action photography with fast shutter speeds, fast frame rates, try and get them in flight, trying to get them taken off. But then as the light drops, there's also a little bit of a chance to perhaps get a bit more creative with shutter speeds and get some movement going. The image on the right is a composite, a slower shutter speed composite of four images that I just put together as a little bit of experimentation. And it's just a photograph that I tried to see what it would look like, and it's something that stuck with me. I quite like it. I don't often do composites, but that's one of the few that I did do, and one of the few that I actually like. So it's a very small floodplain riparian forest area, and there's just such an incredible diversity there. And to be honest, I could probably spend a week safari just going up and down this 2 or 3 kilometre stretch of river, because there's so much going on there. It's such a beautiful area. There's lots of trees fell down because of the floods when they come through, and that creates habitat. It's a wonderful place. But if we did just stop there, if we didn't go any further, then we'd miss out on such a lot. And so we're going to talk about how the sort of habitat changes from the south up to the northern areas of the reserve. So as we come off the floodplains, we go into areas of different habitat. We come out and we've got this area of mixed grassland and tree savanna, and this is where we tend to see a lot of elephants as well. We see elephants pretty much everywhere, but we're more likely to see giraffes down here, more kudu, occasionally impala, and definitely eland as well, which is sort of very, very large, probably the largest antelope that we'd see. Like I say, we do see so many elephants in Tuli. They're pretty much everywhere. And in the dry season, those larger herds tend to split up a lot, and you're more likely to see little mother and calf interaction. More likely to see individuals. Well, you'll see lots of elephants dust bathing, but it's easier to pick out individuals if that's what you want to sort of achieve with your photography. Giraffe there and a dust bathing elephant. You can get so close because with the so few vehicles there, they're never threatened or disturbed. When you see, we were so sad to see all these pictures that we often see from Kruger National Park and Masai Mara National Reserve of loads and loads of vehicles crowding around individuals, and it just doesn't happen because we are one of potentially two vehicles in two camps in the area. So it's so peaceful, and that is reflected very much in the photography and the animal behaviour that we experience. Now, as we sort of come out of this floodplain habitat, then we had the mixed savanna plains, and we have an area of rocky ridges, which are often known as koppies. And in here we've got this bit of a rarity, and this is a brown hyena. We do get them in certain northern areas of South Africa as well. But this is the only place that I've actually seen the brown hyena. You do get them in Namibia on the Skeleton Coast, but like I say, this is the only place that I've seen them. And there is a brown hyena den in these rocky ridges, in these koppies, as they're called. And the hyena itself is very, very elusive. It's a real scavenger. Most people think spotted hyenas are scavengers. They're not. They're very, very good hunters, and they probably hunt more than they scavenge in a lot of areas. But the brown hyena is a lone animal. It can't really hunt as well as a spotted hyena would. And around 90% of their diet is absolutely scavenged opportunistically. They'll take rodents, reptiles, maybe just scrub hair or something if they can. And to photograph it, it's so different. And because we don't see anything, it's many of them, it's very sort of characterful mammal to photograph. I am still actually waiting for my dream photograph of a brown hyena, is to get it on these big sandstone boulders, with sort of the trees behind, or the lovely sunset behind, or something like that. So we have seen it quite a few times, or seen a couple of them, different individuals in different areas, but I'm still waiting for that sort of dream photograph, or of it coming out the den surrounded by the rocks or something like that.
I was going to say, I think the only photo I've got of a brown hyena is its backside, to be honest. So I think you've done well to get its head in.
Yeah, it is an unusual one, because often when we're around at night in the dark, sometimes it comes out, it's just too dark for photography at that time, but we do sort of see it. But sometimes we have been lucky to sort of catch one out in the open in the early morning. And when we do see it, we try to get as many photographs as we can, because they are so rare and so elusive. But we do get spotted hyenas as well. I talked about scavenging and hunting. Spotted hyenas are scavengers, but they're very proficient hunters, because they live in a clan society, and most clans hunt more than they actually scavenge. Different areas in Africa, I think certain clans of hyenas have done studies, and they hunt 60-70% of their prey. Other areas are a little bit lower, but they are good hunters, hyenas. And this one is actually scavenging. He scavenged the remains of a warthog that an adult leopard had killed and was eating, and then he sort of dashed in and took what he could, which was this warthog remain. So these koppies, as they start, they have this fairly dense mapani forest, and the mapani leaves are very beautiful orange and green colour. And I like to try and sort of bring these colours and these sandstone rocks into the habitat. It's not just always going for me for the closer photograph. I like to bring in the colours that are around, especially the trees and the foliage. So often when I'm faced with this kind of image, the the elephant, which is massive, is actually a relatively small part of the photograph, because I do like to get as much habitat in as I can. As we move through the Mopani forests and through the kopjes, we often see quite a lot of birds of prey. Black-chested snake eagles, one example on the left, but we do see other birds of prey as well. Pell's fishing owl, Verreaux's eagle owl, Berwick's eagle, African hawk eagle, often chasing around where the smaller game bird type of things are. The peahens and things, tawny eagle, pearl spotted owlet, tiny little owl that we see up in the trees. We often see African fish eagle down near the Limpopo River as well. Plus we see the usual sort of casts of vultures. And also just another shot of an elephant on the right hand side there, just a calf, and trying to get a composition where we can include the colours of the Mopani trees that are around us as well. And they do, it's quite a unique habitat compared to everywhere else that I've been, so I try to bring those that vegetation into the photographs that I take. So once the light drops, sometimes if you're brave enough and if it's safe to do so, we can climb up onto some of these sandstone kopjes and get a little bit of a sort of look around while we're having a beer and things on a night time. Put the cameras down, stretch your legs, and like I say, as long as it's safe, there's no sign of hyenas or leopards around, we'll maybe take a little climb up just to get a slightly different view on what's around us. We do see lions in the Mopani forest too. They're often moving through the territory, through between the north, the Eagle Rock, and back down to the south, which is the sort of Limpopo River area. Like I say, the northern part of the territory, Eagle Rock and the Molautse River, is the sort of other side of the reserve. And it's not that far away, but it does take a little while to get there because it's quite a sort of, it's not as straightforward as the crow flies kind of route. So speaking of Eagle Rock, as we come out of the Mopani forests and we head north, we start seeing this sort of iconic rock in the backdrop as we're moving towards us. And the habitat changes again quite significantly here. We've got likelihood of the species changing again. You've got the normal, you've got the giraffe, you've got elephants, we've got lions, we'll see the odd kudu here, occasional leopard. But this is probably the area that we're most likely to see cheetah as well, because it's a more open area. Cheetahs prefer open areas for hunting because it matches their strategy of speed, rather than leopards, which is stalking, or lions, which is sort of pride hunting. But it's also a really sort of good area for some other species that we wouldn't see elsewhere in the reserve as it gets to this grassland savanna. Things like secretary birds, very sort of, well, it is a unique bird. There's nothing else really like a secretary bird. And also Corey's bustard on the right. Corey's bustard is actually Botswana's national bird, and it's also the heaviest flying bird, so you tend to see them just walking around a lot or running around a lot. They tend not to fly unless they absolutely have to, because it requires so much effort to do so. And unusually, this fella was had a fish, and Corey's bustard isn't really a fishing bird, and fishing's not usually on their menu. They tend to be taking things like small reptiles, insects, fruit, caterpillars, maybe small bird nestlings, but certainly not fish. And I didn't actually realise it had a fish until I took the photograph and I inspected it a little bit more closely. We also see a lot of jackals in the area, and also it's quite good historically for bat-eared foxes, which are a very, very bizarre and very, very photogenic species, and probably had more opportunities to photograph bat-eared foxes in this area than I have in the Mara and in South Africa. It seems to be a sort of a good population of them. They seem to be a little bit more chilled than they are in Kenya, in the Mara as well. So sometimes this really depends on the movements of the lion prides and the elephant herds, but we might actually just park at the bottom of Eagle Rock and take a little bit of a walk up. Despite its height and how imposing it is in the backdrop, it's actually quite a steady walk up. It doesn't take long to get up there, and if it's considered safe, like I say, it's gentle. You get up some incredible views. If people want to do it, we can sometimes arrange it. And if some people don't want to do it, then we get another vehicle perhaps, and we make other arrangements for them to continue with the drive. But if you can do it and you want to, and it's safe, it's definitely worth doing because you get some incredible views at the top, and you've got this dry riverbed. It occasionally has some little standing pools, but this is the Motloutse riverbed, and it feeds into the Limpopo off further to the east near the Zimbabwe border. Often see elephants crossing from one side to the other. This is the border of Tuli wilderness before it goes into the reserve, so we can't actually cross north, and the people in the north can't cross into the south either. It's kind of, that's the boundary of the reserve. We've also seen leopards, fresh leopard spoor while we've been up there, so you do have to have your wits around you. But there's a lot of cultural history involved in Eagle Rock. It used to be a human Bronze Age settlement, so there's often bits of pottery and things around, and it's quite interesting to hear a little bit of history about the area and the significance of Eagle Rock in the sort of culture of the people from the Bronze Age in Botswana. Another little view from the top there, you can see some vehicle tracks down on the river and down on the ground level of Tuli as well. We can drive on the riverbed. It is safe to do so. It's not like quicksand or anything like that. We're not really going to sink. And we do get a lot of animals down there. We get a lot of tracks and things of water monitors. And a lot of the lions like to chill on the river as well. So sometimes we drop down to river level to photograph some of the lion prides. And these are a couple of shots from last year, where this lioness is well lying under a sort of tree, and you get that dapple light coming through on the left-hand side there, and contrasting light and the shadows. And on the right-hand side, we just saw these three males line up, so we kind of moved the vehicle around a bit to get the sort of heads going back in succession. And it was a very sort of similar effect to what I was talking about the Chacma baboons earlier on, where the light was coming from behind, so we deliberately decided to go to that angle to get this sort of backlight and rimlit effect and underexposure, just to sort of show the create the shape and the form rather than detail. That's what it's all about. It's just another opportunity to do something when the light presents itself in our favour. So back down on the ground level, you can see Eagle Rock in the background. We like to come down, we like to have a coffee or a couple of biscuits and things when we're out and about, just to have a little bit of a break. Sometimes it's an opportunity to photograph things that are going on in the river. We've sat there a couple of times outside the vehicle photographing elephants as they've been digging for water in the river as well, which is a sort of nice opportunity to get a wider angle lens out, rather than doing everything close up and bringing in some of the rocky features and the trees on the riverbed and the river banks as well. So before I kind of hand back to Sam, a presentation about Tuli Wilderness probably wouldn't be complete without mentioning hornbills. There are so many. I mean, there's lots and lots of birds around. We've got lilac-breasted rollers, there's drongos, there's bee-eaters, there's 2 or 3 different species of bee-eaters. There's all sorts around there, all sorts of sparrows, all those birds of prey. But hornbills just seem to be the most numerous, and they're quite big, so they're quite good to photograph. So we do get the red-billed hornbill in abundance. We get the southern yellow-billed hornbill in abundance as well, and we get the African grey hornbill. They're the 3 main hornbills that I've seen there anyway, to be able to photograph. So that's basically it from me. I shall pass you back over to Sam.
I think you've got a bit more here, actually, Alan. I think there's 3. I think there's 3 of your favourite shots.
Oh, yes.
And just kind of describing your,
Yeah.
some of your favourite experiences from Tuli, the shots that go with it.
Yeah, favourite photograph. Well, it took me quite a long time to think about this, to be honest, because I would say in Tuli, wherever I've been, I would say if I took the total amount of photographs that I've taken in one area, and I said, right, these are all my Botswana photographs from over the years, these are all my South Africa photographs over the years, these are all my Kenya photographs, I would say Botswana and Tuli Wilderness has probably got the highest proportion of keepers. I wouldn't say it's got the most photographs, because sometimes I've taken more photographs, but the proportion, the percentage, if you like, of photographs that I've actually kept is probably the highest from Botswana. So it was quite difficult to come up with something. So I decided that one of my favourite photographs was something that was just a little bit different. And we were tracking some elephants through a Mapani forest. And I think we touched on this in the last webinar we did, Sam. We're talking about how trees can actually communicate with each other. So I'll just touch on it quickly because we've already talked about it in the past. But when a tree's under distress, they release tannins, and the tannins can be picked up by other trees. And when those tannins are picked up by other trees, they sort of promote their own tannin creation, and the tannins make the tree, the leaf, and the bark quite distasteful to elephants. But elephants have found a little bit of a way around that. So you often find that when elephants detect a high tannin content in trees, they'll start feeding it when in the wind direction that's the other way, so the trees taste a little bit nicer. So we kind of used that to decide where these elephants were going and what direction they were likely to be heading, and we headed off in that direction because we knew there was an area of very, very fine sand dust, and we hoped that they would start coming and dust bathing, and they did. And we were actually in a terrible position when I took the photograph. It was heavily backlit. There was a really bright sky behind. So I was humming and hawing about exposure and composition. And what it forced us to actually do was go in much, much tighter because I didn't want the really bright, contrasty sky behind. It was, it was basically photographing into the sun, and obviously I had to overexpose to bring out what detail I wanted in the elephant, and it was just too much. So I cropped really tight in, zoomed far in with a 600mm, used a little bit of a high frame rate, and just as this elephant was sort of dropping its trunk down into the dust and throwing the dust up around its head, just using a fast frame rate to take a few shots. And this was one of the shots that stood out. Just with the dust around, you can't actually see the eyes, you can't really see anything, just the ears and the trunk and the tusk. And it's a bit of an abstract feel to it, a bit of action. And I just like the colours of the dust against the greyness of the elephant. And that is one of my favourite photographs from Tuli, despite all the lions, despite all the leopards and things. It was just something a little bit different that I've never seen happen quite so much in other places. And it's entirely subjective. People might not like it, but it doesn't really matter because, well, I do,
Exactly.
That's all that does matter, really, isn't it? It's whether you
Oh
like
yeah,
what
that's
you
it
take,
in photography, isn't it? It's what you like, and I think the detail in that dust as well is incredible.
Yeah.
Especially on that left hand side, you've got all that intricacy there. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It's just a shot that I like. It just stands out because it was a bit different, and the whole sort of story around it, really.
Yeah.
And it was something we weren't really expecting. We often use a lot of fieldcraft to say we know there's lions over there, we've tracked them, we know there's a leopard there, we've heard the impala alarm calling, we can hear the vervet monkeys going crazy, we think we're going to find a leopard. But with this, it was just something that really we knew they were heading in that direction, but we weren't kind of necessarily waiting for it. So it was a sort of pleasant outcome of something where perhaps the light and the conditions that we were working in weren't necessarily favouring normal photography because of the high contrast. So, a favourite moment? Well, I do love a wildlife story, and building on a story. And so I showed this photograph before when I was talking about leopards down in the riparian forest. And what had happened was we were sitting having a quick cup of coffee before we went out on our afternoon game drive. And we could hear some impala alarm calling. It was a bit unsettled. We could hear the baboons barking. So Joe and I kind of thought, there's a leopard around. We're going to go and investigate this. So we set off down to the river area where we could hear this action. And we were looking for a leopard. And Joe and I were in the vehicle. We were out the vehicle. We could see prints. There was prints going in every direction of leopard. And it was just... We were then losing them in the grass. It was almost too much evidence, and it was very difficult to actually follow. And we in the end, we just thought we've got no idea where this leopard's going. And 1 minute it was calling 500 yards there. Again, it was calling. You could hear alarm calling 200 yards behind us. It was definitely moving around, and there was so much evidence we just couldn't follow it. And we got a little bit kind of cheesed off with it in the end, and we thought, let's just go and have a break, let's go and have a look at something else and just see if things settle back down, because all the prey animals were just going crazy. So we drove back up to the plains, and I think we spotted a genet in a sort of underneath an upturned tree, so we were trying to sort of point that out. and everything had gone a little bit quiet down in the river. And as we were doing that, we heard the impala start alarm calling again, and it was much, much closer. So I thought, right, let's go. So a little bit of a Ferrari safari down towards the river again. And we were looking around, and again, it was getting all a little bit confusing, and we were just about to give up. It was getting a little bit frustrating. And then all of a sudden, we saw a lioness. And we thought, so it wasn't a leopard, but we had seen leopard prints, to be fair, but it was a lioness that revealed herself. And we were sitting next to this huge sycamore fig tree, and this lioness was walking towards us, and we thought, yeah, we'll get some shots of the lioness, great, lovely sort of environment. And then all of a sudden, behind us to the side, I heard this like rustle coming through the undergrowth, and this leopard just shot out of the undergrowth, went straight up this tree that was right in front of us. And the lion got a fright. The leopard knew exactly what was going on. We shit ourselves, It was the leopard going up the tree, and it all just suddenly came together. The leopard had a carcass of an impala up on the tree. We hadn't seen the impala carcass. And the leopard was obviously knew the lioness was around. This was the story, if you like, that come together. The lioness was attracted to the scent. The leopard was going back up the tree to protect it. So there we were sitting, and we all have these huge sort of 3, 4, 5, even 600mm lenses. So nobody could actually photograph the lioness and the leopard at the same time. So you've got a leopard up in the tree, sort of baring its teeth and snarling and growling at this lioness below. And we just sat for ages photographing the leopard up here, the lioness down there. And the lioness was a bit pathetic. She was just kind of looking up at the tree, hoping for little bits of scraps to fall down. And now and again, she would try and sort of come up with this really bad attempt at climbing the tree. But, lions, I know there is a pride of lions that are tree climbing specialists, but not in Botswana. She had no chance. And there was no way this leopard was going to move. And we got some sort of iPhone video of, leopard, lion, and that went on for quite a while. And eventually the sun dropped, and we were sort of left to just kind of photograph the lions as well. It was all quite pathetic, this lioness. These are really almost dark. These are shot at f2.8, and I think I was doing something like a 50th of a second or something, even at highest ISO, to try and get some shots. And she was just looking up all the time and licking her lips, and it was really quite pathetic, Just go and hunt your own food, and you might actually get something. And then it was just a great moment where everything came together. It was a fantastic thing, that one of those sort of really highly memorable moments. But the next day, we actually went back the next morning, and not only was she there, but there was another lioness there, and the leopard was still up the tree with this impala. And then the next day they were still there, and then we left after that. So I don't know what happened, how long they'd actually sat waiting for a little bit of scrap to fall down. I've got no idea. But it was a great moment. It was one of those, like, when the fieldcraft comes together, and you think you're defeated almost, and it came together in a way that we didn't expect it to come together.
Yeah. And I suppose also the luxury of being at Tuli and being able to wait as well. If you're at another reserve, there's other cars wanting to come in, you move off, and you don't get that story.
Yeah. I mean, most of the vehicle from the other camp, Mojave, the sister camp, it's the same people. It's the same people's camp that might join us, but it's only 2 vehicles. It's never a problem.
Yeah, you can wait and see it all unfold, which is really nice.
But even that's rare for them to join us as well, because usually we sort of swap over, and we use a little bit. We keep in touch and have a little bit of intelligence. So if they're at that end, we'll go at that end and information share, rather than both deliberately being in the same area at the same time. So yeah, that's probably one of my favourite moments. Just that story coming together as well. So, I mean, it's before I hand back again to Sam, just to sort of conclude some of the photographs that I've taken. I know I've mentioned it, but Tuli is a very, very special reserve. It's a special place. It's very unpredictable. And I don't mean animal behaviour is predictable, but the actual reserve, the grander things, is very unpredictable. It's an incredible habitat, so many opportunities for photographing species in such a varied habitat. It's also very, very quiet. That's one of the things that we really do love about it. We just mentioned Serolo Camp, Mojave Camp. Few vehicles, we have a lot of one-to-ones, and when you've got few vehicles and you haven't got that sort of feeling of stress, right, we've got another vehicle, we've got maximum of 12 minutes here before we're going to move out, we've got to let somebody else in. It's really good for photography tuition as well. Let's not lose sight of what we're actually there for, especially sort of beginners as well, to when you've got more time with something, you can spend more time chatting to photographers. You can spend more time giving a little bit of tuition and a little bit more instruction, and you can do it on a little bit of a one-to-one basis as well, because you know you're not sort of stressing the animal, because you know there's not no other vehicles around. So that's very, very, it's a really good advantage of being in Tuli as well.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, and as people will know, I'm a big, big advocate of fieldcraft, and working with somebody like Joe is amazing. I mentioned before, he's a great tracker, and all these sort of sandy tracks and all these sandy areas that we follow are great for having the time, or we have the time for stopping, just getting out of the vehicle. We're not sort of surrounded by bushveld, so we're not kind of worried that there's a leopard or a lion 3 yards from us or anything like that. Um, Getting out and looking at the prints, looking at the tracks that we see all around, looking at the spoor, all this evidence of what animals are leaving, investigating what animal they belong to, and myself and Joe will kind of have a little bit of a chat about what animal it is, and classic cases like we find what I thought were leopard prints, but it wasn't. He decided they were baboon prints, which are quite similar, but the baboon was walking on its tiptoes, and you could tell by the depth of the print, and I was like blown away by that. So I'm always learning as well, which is why I like it. Um, but it's great just to be able to do that, because we're not stressing for time, and we can get out and we can follow that story. Right, we've got some animal, we've got some lion prints, because there's so few vehicles. If one of the classic things is, when did that animal pass? If there's a track on top of it, the chances are it can only be our vehicle. It's not going to be the
Yeah.
fact that there's another 12 vehicles have driven over that track in the last 20 minutes or anything like that. So it really sort of helps with the lack of disturbance to
Mhm.
spoor and tracks and prints, and we can then sort of follow up on a lot of sightings. We can really build tracking into the whole fieldcraft of going to find animals. And the number of we've probably done that in Botswana more than anywhere else. Actually stopped, looked at prints, been driving along with my sort of head hanging out of the vehicle, trying not to bang it on a passing tree or something like that, and looking and trying to sort of help Joe follow the tracks and prints. And lo and behold, then you find the lions
Mhm.
and the leopards, and it just brings that whole fieldcraft thing together. And Tule Wilderness is a fantastic place to do that.
Mm. And I think that's a really key point about it. Of course, our photo safaris are about taking photos, but this one in particular is much more than that. It's
Yeah.
you see in this photo as well. It's about having fun and enjoying yourself, and having a drink with a sundowner. But also that story there about Joe and his tracking ability and everything, all that knowledge that comes with it, that people take away. And I
Mhm.
think I think to try and kind of summarize this Botswana photo safari, it's exclusive, in that we've got the camp to ourselves and also the area to ourselves, off the beaten track. So it's an area that's not that often visited for some reason, and a real wilderness experience. And I think it's the connection to that landscape that you get, an unfenced camp, a real wild feeling,
Mm.
and then the unique photography that comes with that. Getting the photos of that interaction between the leopard and the lion, or interesting behaviors. It's
Yeah.
a really, really special place. Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's kind of brings a lot of my bit to an end, thankfully.